close your eyes for a moment. Imagine waking up, not to the soft chime of your phone alarm or the gentle warmth of sunlight filtered through blackout curtains. Imagine waking up to the sound of a church bell, so loud and so merciless it rattles the wooden walls around you. Imagine the first breath you take is cold, bitterly, aggressively cold, and it smells like a farmyard that lost a fight with a brewery. Imagine that before you've even opened your eyes. Something is already crawling on you. Welcome to the morning of April 14th, 1325. Welcome to the rest of your very short, very uncomfortable life. The bed beneath you is not a bed in any sense you would recognize. It is a sack, a rough, hand-stitched sack of coarse linen, stuffed with straw, dried hay, and whatever else was available when it was last filled, which was a long time ago. The straw has compacted under months of use into something closer to gravel. It crinkles and pokes with every movement, and it smells, deeply, unmistakably, of mildew, animal dander, and the kind of ancient human sweat that has had all winter to settle into the fibres. There is no pillow beneath your head. There is a rolled bundle of cloth that approximates one if you squint and lower your expectations dramatically. Over you lies a wool blanket, a single one. It was likely a decent blanket once, perhaps 2 or 3 winters ago. Now it is stiff with grime, heavy with accumulated filth, and home to a thriving colony of fleas that have staked their claim and are not remotely interested in leaving. You feel them before you see them, tiny, insistent pinpricks moving across your ankles, your wrists, the back of your neck. This is not unusual. This is simply Tuesday. The room around you is one room, just one. The walls are timber and packed mud, wattle and daub, they call it, and they do a passable job of keeping the wind out, except where they don't, which is several places. The roof is thatched, and last night it rained, so there is a wet patch spreading across the earthen floor near the eastern wall. The floor itself is dirt, packed, walked upon, occasionally swept dirt. There is a fire pit near the centre of the room, the coals from last night still faintly glowing orange beneath a skin of grey ash, pushing thin ribbons of smoke toward a hole in the ceiling that acts as a chimney when the wind cooperates, which it rarely does. Around you, breathing and shifting and scratching, are your family members. Your mother, 2 younger siblings, an older brother, and someone's cousin who arrived 3 months ago and seems to have simply decided to stay. No one has asked him to leave. There is no concept of personal space here, no bedroom door to close, no corner of the world that belongs exclusively to you. You are 22 years old. Your back already aches. Your knees already creak. Your teeth, 3 of which are currently rotting in your jaw, throb with a dull and patient persistence. You swing your feet over the edge of the mattress and place them on the cold, damp floor. Somewhere near the far wall, a goat shifts and blinks at you with ancient, indifferent eyes. Your day has begun, and it only gets harder from here. You've been awake for approximately 4 minutes, and already your body is making demands. Urgent, non-negotiable demands. The kind that in your previous life would have been resolved in 30 seconds, with a flush and a faucet. But this is 1325, and the universe has a very different arrangement in mind for you this morning. Nature is calling, and it is not calling politely. It is pounding on the door, rattling the hinges, and threatening to make a scene. There is no bathroom. Let that settle for a moment. Not a bad bathroom, not an outdated one with questionable grout and a dripping tap. No bathroom at all. No porcelain, no seat, no paper, no flush, no plunger sulking in the corner. What exists instead, just outside the door of your hut, is a wooden bucket, a shared wooden bucket, partially sheltered by a leaning timber frame that generously calls itself outhouse, though calling it that feels like an insult to outhouses everywhere. It is open to the wind, it is never empty, and this morning, thanks to your uncle's ill-advised encounter with a bowl of fermented turnips last night, it is especially catastrophically full. You hold your breath. You do what you must. And then comes the next step, the part that would make any modern person weep quietly into their hands. You take the bucket, or whatever vessel has been designated for the purpose, walk to the edge of the street, and you throw it out into the road. This was not considered rude. This was simply the system. In towns and cities across medieval Europe, the street functioned as a communal drain, a slow-moving river of human waste, animal droppings, kitchen scraps, and liquids too numerous and too troubling to catalogue. You were supposed to shout a warning first. The phrase was "gardez-vous," borrowed loosely from the French, meaning "watch out below." Whether anyone below actually moved in time was, historically speaking, a matter of considerable doubt. If you happen to live in a larger town, you might have access to public latrines. Do not let the word public fool you into imagining anything dignified. These are long wooden benches suspended over a pit or a running stream, with holes cut at intervals, and absolutely no partitions between them. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, you make eye contact, you try to think about other things. Ventilation is tea. Heretical, privacy is a concept so foreign, it might as well be witchcraft. And if you are fortunate enough to live in a castle, if you have somehow climbed the social ladder far enough to sleep behind stone walls, you might use a garde-robe. This is a small alcove built into the castle wall, with a stone seat and a shaft that drops directly into the moat below. It is cold, it is draughty, and in times of siege, clever and deeply motivated attackers have been known to scale those very shafts to breach the walls. There are men in history books who essentially crawled through a sewage chute and conquered a fortress. Dedication takes many forms. As for cleaning yourself afterward, the options are creative and deeply humbling. Straw, leaves, moss, a scrap of old wool, sometimes nothing at all, which perhaps explains why the formal handshake took centuries to become fashionable. You straighten up, breathe the morning air, which is not in any sense fresh, and turn back toward the hut. Breakfast awaits. And somehow, improbably, things are about to get worse. You step back into the hut, and for just a moment, you allow yourself a small, fragile hope. Surely, after the architectural nightmare of your bed and the existential horror of your morning bathroom experience, the universe owes you something decent to eat. A warm meal, perhaps? Something with flavour, something that doesn't require you to lower your standards quite so dramatically. You stand near the fire pit, rubbing your hands together over the faintly glowing coals, and you wait for hope to materialize into breakfast. It does not. What materializes instead is a pot of pottage, and if you've never heard that word before, allow the sound of it to prepare you. It sounds exactly like what it is. Pottage is, in the loosest possible definition, a soup. It is made by boiling whatever is available: oats, dried peas, leek, turnips, the occasional fistful of herbs, in water over a low fire, until everything surrenders its individual identity and becomes a single, grey, thick, featureless mass. It has the colour of a cloudy sky and the texture of something that has given up. There is no seasoning beyond whatever wild herbs your mother managed to dry last autumn. There is no salt, because salt is expensive, rationed, and treated with the reverence most people reserve for gold. There is no meat, because it is not a feast day, and you are not a nobleman, and the universe has already made its position on your comfort abundantly clear this morning. You eat it from a wooden bowl with a spoon carved from the same wood, worn smooth by years of use. The pottage is warm, which is genuinely the best thing that can be said about it. It tastes of boiled oats and quiet resignation. You eat every drop, because hunger in 1325 is not a polite inconvenience that a granola bar can fix. Hunger here is a serious, looming, ever-present threat. You eat what is given, you are grateful, and you do not complain, because complaining requires energy, and energy requires calories, and calories are precisely what you don't have enough of. To wash it down, you drink ale, not because you are an enthusiast of early morning drinking, but because the water will kill you. This is not an exaggeration offered for dramatic effect. It is straightforward medieval biology. Water sources in and around human settlements are contaminated with everything that has been thrown, leaked, or washed into them over generations. Drinking it raw is a reliable path to dysentery, typhoid, or any number of creative intestinal catastrophes. Ale, having been brewed, meaning boiled, is considerably safer. It is thin, weak, slightly sour, and nothing that a modern craft brewery would dare put its name on. But it is technically safer than the altar. Native, so you drink it. Even the children drink it. Everyone drinks it. The morning ale is the great equalizer. If you are lucky, there is bread. It is dense, dark, and chewy in the way that suggests the grain was not entirely clean when it was ground. Medieval flour is milled between stones, and small fragments of grit, husk, and occasionally actual stone make their way into the dough. Eating bread in the 14th century is a slow and patient act of dental destruction. Historians examining medieval skeletons have found teeth worn flat, ground down not by age, but by decades of eating bread that was essentially very slow sandpaper. Your 3 already aching teeth throb in quiet anticipation. You set the bowl down. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. Outside, the village is stirring. The animals are louder, and the sun is barely cresting the horizon. You have consumed perhaps 600 calories, if you are being generous. Your body, which will spend the next 12 hours doing hard physical labor, needed closer to 3,000. The deficit is noted. The deficit is ignored. There is work to be done, and the fields do not care about your nutritional requirements. Step outside for a moment and look at yourself. Not in a mirror. Mirrors in 1325 are polished metal discs owned by people who are decidedly not you. But in the reflection of a rain puddle, if you can find one that isn't currently being used as a latrine. What you see is a person who looks considerably older than they are. The lines around your eyes arrived early. Your posture carries the particular curve of someone who has been bending over fields and hauling water since childhood. Your hands are rough, cracked, and permanently stained with soil. You are 22 years old, and your body is already keeping a very detailed record of every hardship it has endured. It is not a flattering record. And the worst part, the part that should genuinely concern you, is that your body is currently fighting battles you cannot even see. Begin with your mouth, because your mouth is a disaster. Dentistry in the 14th century exists in the same way that justice exists, technically, but not in any form you would find reassuring. There are no fillings, no cleanings, no fluoride, no gentle hygienist asking whether you've been flossing. There is, if you are deeply unlucky, a barber surgeon who will extract your rotting tooth with a pair of iron pliers, while 2 men hold you down and everyone nearby pretends not to hear the screaming. The operation has a reasonable chance of leaving you with a jaw infection that spreads upward and kills you within a fortnight. Many people choose to simply live with the pain. The throbbing becomes background noise, like the wind or the church bell, ever present, accepted, quietly devastating. Move outward from your mouth to your skin, which is hosting its own civilization. Lice are so common in medieval Europe that they are not considered a sign of uncleanliness. They are simply considered a sign of being alive. They live in your hair, your clothing, the seams of your wool tunic, the blanket you sleep under. You pick them out when you find them, the way a modern person might absently pick a loose thread from their sleeve, with no particular urgency and no expectation of ever being fully rid of them. Fleas travel between you and the animals who share your living space with cheerful indiscrimination. And where fleas go, in this particular century, something far more sinister follows. The Black Death has not yet arrived in England in 1325. It is coming, creeping westward from Central Asia, along trade routes carried in the bloodstream of rats and the bodies of fleas, set to arrive in 1347 and erase nearly half the population of Europe in the space of a few catastrophic years. You do not know this. You cannot know this, but your body is already vulnerable to it in ways that are almost unbearable to contemplate. Your immune system, malnourished and overworked, is operating on the medieval equivalent of a shoestring budget. It has been fighting low-grade infections your entire life, small wounds that never quite healed cleanly, winter coughs that lingered for months, fevers that came and went like unwelcome relatives. Medicine, should you require it, is a landscape of sincere intentions and spectacular failures. The physician, if your village has one, which it likely does not, operates under the ancient theory of the four humours. Your body contains blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and illness is the result of these falling out of balance. The prescribed treatment is almost always bleeding. A vein is opened, blood is drained into a bowl, and the patient is monitored to see whether they improve or, as happened with troubling frequency, simply become too weak to continue. Herbs are prescribed with genuine faith. Prayers are offered with equal conviction. The line between medicine and theology in 1325 is not a line at all. It is a suggestion, faint as smoke. You roll your sleeve back down. You square your aching shoulders. Somewhere nearby a child is coughing with the deep, rattling persistence of someone who has been coughing since November. No one rushes to help. Coughing, in medieval life, is simply part of the background music of existence. You turn your face toward the fields stretching out beyond the village edge, grey-green and frost-tipped in the early morning light. Your body is under siege from a dozen invisible enemies, and now, on top of everything else, it is time to go to work. The field does not care that your back hurts. It does not care that your breakfast was a bowl of grey paste and a cup of sour ale, or that your joints have been aching since you were 17, or that the frost has not fully lifted from the ground and the soil is still iron-hard beneath your feet. The field simply exists, vast and demanding and indifferent, stretching out before you in the pale morning light, like a task so enormous it has no visible end, and you walk toward it, tool in hand, because this is what you do. This is what your father did, and his father before him, and every generation of your family reaching back further than anyone bothered to write down. You work. You work until the light fails, and then you sleep, and you wake, and you work again. The tool in your hand is a wooden plough if you are fortunate enough to share one with your neighbours, or a simple iron-tipped spade if you are not. The plough is pulled by an ox, a slow, magnificent, irreplaceable animal that is, without question, more valuable to your household than any individual human member of it. If the ox dies, the family faces ruin. This is not an exaggeration. The ox is fed before the children on cold mornings, because the ox is the engine upon which survival runs, and everyone in the village understands this with a clarity that requires no discussion. You treat that animal with a reverence that borders on religious. The system under which you labour has a name, feudalism, and it is designed with remarkable efficiency to ensure that the people doing the hardest work receive the smallest reward. The land you are ploughing does not belong to you. It belongs to the Lord, whose castle sits on the hill at the edge of the village, like a stone fist reminding you of exactly where power lives. You are permitted to farm a strip of it, a narrow allocated portion of the open field, in exchange for working the Lord's land several days each week without pay. This is called corvée labour. Nend, it is not optional. It is not negotiable. It is simply the price of existing on ground that someone else owns, which is all ground everywhere, as far as you have ever walked in any direction. Beyond the corvée, there are taxes. There is the tithe, 1/10 of everything you produce, paid to the church with a smile, because the church controls the gateway to heaven, and you would very much like to go there eventually. There is the tallage, a tax levied by your lord whenever he decides he needs more money, which is frequently. There is a fee to use the Lord's mill to grind your grain, a fee to use his oven to bake your bread, a fee in some regions simply for the privilege of getting married. The medieval economy, viewed from the bottom, is a remarkable system in which the people who produce everything own almost nothing. You bend. You dig, you turn the soil with your arms and your back, and the full weight of your exhausted body. The morning stretches, the sun climbs with agonizing slowness. Around you, other villagers work in silence or low conversation. Your neighbors, your relatives, people you have known your entire life, because almost no one in 1325 travels more than 20 miles from where they were born. The village is your entire world, its boundaries as familiar as your own hands, its gossip and grievances as well worn as the path between your hut and this field. By midday, your lower back has moved beyond aching into something that deserves a stronger word. Your hands are bleeding, where the wooden handle has reopened the same calloused cracks that never quite heal between seasons. You stop. You eat, if you brought anything, which is a heel of yesterday's bread and perhaps a hard wedge of cheese that is more rind than cheese. You drink from a leather flask. You sit for perhaps 15 minutes on the cold ground, and in those 15 minutes you are as sea. Lose to rest as this day will allow. Then you stand, you pick up the tool, and you go back to work, because the field does not care. It never does. It never will. Imagine for a moment that something goes wrong, not the ordinary grinding wrongness of daily medieval life, not the fleas or the pottage or the frozen field, but something specific, an accusation, a pointed finger, a neighbour who claims you stole his pig, or a whisper that travels through the village like smoke, curling into ears and taking shape as something dangerous. Perhaps someone says you cursed their cow. Perhaps your landlord decides you owe more than you paid. Perhaps you simply looked at the wrong person on the wrong morning and the wrong conclusion was drawn. In the modern world, you would have rights. You would have a lawyer, a courtroom, a presumption of innocence so fundamental it is written into the architecture of the legal system. In 1325, you have none of these things. What you have, instead, is God. And God, it turns out, expresses his legal opinions in some extremely uncomfortable ways. The medieval justice system is not a system in any sense that a modern mind would recognize. It is a theatre, dramatic, public, and almost entirely disconnected from anything resembling evidence. If you are accused of a crime and the matter cannot be resolved by the testimony of neighbours or the judgment of a local lord, you may be subjected to a trial by ordeal. This is exactly what it sounds like, and somehow worse. You might be required to carry a red-hot iron bar 9 paces, and then have your hand wrapped in cloth. 3 days later, the cloth is removed. If the wound is healing cleanly, God has declared you innocent. If it is infected, which, given that germ theory will not be discovered for another 5 centuries, it almost certainly will be, you are guilty. The logic is airtight if you do not examine it at all. Alternatively, you might be thrown into a body of water. If you float, you are guilty. The pure water has rejected your corrupted soul. If you sink, you are innocent. The rescue, theoretically, happens before drowning. Theoretically, this particular ordeal was used with special enthusiasm in cases of suspected witchcraft. A charge so elastic and so vague that it could be stretched to cover almost any woman who was too old, too strange, too solitary, too successful with herbs, or simply too inconvenient to her neighbours. The accusation required no proof. The proof was the ordeal. The ordeal was the punishment. The logic ate itself, and no one at the time found this troubling. The Church stands at the centre of all of this, not merely as a spiritual institution, but as the most powerful political force in the known world. The Pope in Rome holds authority that kings genuinely fear. Excommunication, the act of being formally expelled from the Church, and therefore from the community of Christian souls, is a weapon so devastating it has brought monarchs to their knees, literally barefoot in the snow, begging forgiveness. For an ordinary peasant, excommunication is a social death sentence. You cannot receive sacraments. You cannot be buried in consecrated ground. Your neighbours, fearing contamination of their own souls, will not speak to you, trade with you, or acknowledge your existence. You become a ghost while still breathing. Sunday Mass is not optional. It is not a matter of personal faith or weekend scheduling. Attendance is mandatory, enforced by social pressure so total and so ancient that the idea of simply staying home would not occur to most people any more than the idea of not eating would. The church building itself is the largest, most permanent structure most villagers will ever enter, stone where everything else is wood and mud, vaulted, and dim and smelling of tallow candles and centuries of incense. The priest speaks in Latin, which you do not understand. The sermon washes over you in a language as foreign as birdsong. But the stained glass above the altar tells stories in colour and light, and the imagery painted on the walls is vivid and deliberate. Heaven glowing gold on one side, hell a writhing, screaming nightmare on the other. The message requires no translation. Obey, tithe, submit, or burn. You walk home from the church in the grey afternoon light, and you think about none of this analytically, because analytical thinking about the church is another path to accusations you cannot afford. You simply walk, and you believe, and you hope. That belief is enough to keep the darkness at bay. The village closes around you like a fist. Night is coming. And in medieval Europe, the night belongs to fears that daylight only barely keeps at arm's length. The sun does not set gently in 1325. It drops. One moment the sky is a dull pewter grey, streaked with the last amber remnants of a day that asked everything of you and gave back very little. And then the light is gone, swallowed by a darkness so complete and so absolute that a modern person would find it genuinely disorienting. There are no street lights, no lit windows glowing warm and golden from neighbouring houses, no distant hum of a city keeping itself awake. The darkness that descends on a medieval village at nightfall is the oldest kind of darkness, thick, heavy, and full of everything the human imagination has ever placed inside it. You step through the door of your hut, pull it shut behind you, and the world outside ceases to exist in any meaningful way. The night belongs to something else, entirely. Inside, the fire is rebuilt with careful economy. Wood is not unlimited. Every log placed on the fire is a calculation. Warmth against waste, fought against survival. The flames push back the darkness just far enough to illuminate the faces of your family gathered around the pit, shadows dancing across the walls like restless spirits. Tallow candles, made from rendered animal fat, flicker on the rough wooden shelf near the door. They smell exactly as you would expect rendered animal fat to smell. But they are light, and light in this darkness is worth more than its smell costs you. So you are grateful. You are always grateful for small things in 1325, because small things are frequently all there is. The evening meal, if there is one beyond what was left of the morning's pottage, is eaten quickly and in silence broken only by the fire, and the animals shifting in their corner of the room. Your younger sibling has developed a cough over the last week, the deep, persistent kind that settles into the chest and makes itself comfortable. You watch them across the firelight and you feel the specific helplessness of a parent or a sibling in a world without medicine worth the name. You place your hand briefly on their forehead. It is warm. You say nothing because there is nothing to say that would help. And words without solutions are a weight this family does not need, added to everything else it already carries. Outside, the village is not entirely silent. Dogs bark at intervals, at what no one is certain, and the uncertainty is its own particular discomfort. In the forest beyond the field's edge, wolves are not a metaphor or a fairy tale embellishment. They are real, they are hungry in winter, and the thin wooden walls of your hut are a comfort only psychologically. The locks on medieval doors are simple iron latches, the kind a determined shoulder could resolve in seconds. Bandits and roving mercenaries, soldiers between wars, which is to say, soldiers between employers, travel the roads at night and have been known to descend on isolated villages with a thoroughness that leaves nothing worth taking and nothing worth staying for. You know this. Everyone knows this. It is the ambient terror of rural medieval life, never spoken aloud because speaking it changes nothing and costs you sleep. You cannot afford to lose. Fire is the fear that lives closest to the heart. In a village of wooden structures, thatch rooftops, open flames, and no organized means of fighting a blaze beyond a human chain of buckets and desperate prayer, fire is the disaster with no defense. It has consumed entire villages in single nights, leapt from rooftop to rooftop on a dry summer wind, and reduced years of labor and every material possession a family owned to a field of ash before dawn. You banked your fire carefully tonight. You always do. But carefully is not the same as certainly, and certainty is a luxury this century does not stock. You settle onto the straw mattress. The wool blanket, heavy and grim, is pulled to your chin. Around you, your family arranges itself in the familiar geometry of people who have shared this space so long they fit together in the dark like puzzle pieces. The fire settles into coals, the candles are pinched out one by one. The darkness returns, complete and ancient, pressing gently against the walls of the hut like something patient and enormously old waiting for its moment. You close your eyes. Your back aches. Your stomach is not quite full, and probably never is. Somewhere in the thatch above you, a mouse moves with small, deliberate steps. The cousin who never left is already snoring. Outside, a dog barks once and falls silent. You think briefly of tomorrow, the field, the cold, the pottage, the bells, and then exhaustion takes you the way it always does, completely and without ceremony, like a candle going out. You sleep, and in sleeping, you Joe. In every generation of human being who has ever lain down in the darkness and made the same wordless, instinctive prayer, that the morning comes, that the fire holds, that the cough does not worsen, that tomorrow, somehow, against all reasonable odds, you are still here. In 1325, surviving until morning is not a given. It is an achievement. It is on most days the only one that truly matters. And if you manage it, if the sun rises and finds you breathing and vertical and ready to do it all again, then congratulations, truly, you have lasted a day in medieval times. Most people, if dropped here without warning, would not. Sleep well. You've earned it.